So, hello everyone. What is this? What happened to the old logins? The old login pictures that were like huge, like colourful environments. They were actually cool and interesting and artistic. So as opposed to whatever's going on in this general vicinity. So, as you probably guessed, I've got a bit of history with this game. When I was a youngster and time was something that I actually had, I played a lot of MMOs. This was in the 2006 to 2008 era when World of Warcraft, or WoW, came out and everyone was like, hey, let's make that but slightly different. The MMOs that I dabbled in at the time include Repels, MapleStory, yeah I know, Drift City and Pirate King Online. But there was one I liked more than any other, one that takes inspiration from games that weren't WoW, specifically Final Fantasy. As the title suggests, it was Atlantica Online. It was made by a company called Endors, who made Luminary, Rise of the Gunzu. Remember that game, everyone? It was released to high praise, winning the Korean Game and Game World Championships in 2008 and 2009, whatever that means. It was my favourite MMORPG of the time, one of the most original, but it also had a complicated release, changing publishers several times, and now it sits in relative obscurity, which is not uncommon for a 10-year-old MMO, but I think the general opinion is that the former luster this game had has well and truly worn off, despite still being a good game. In this video I aim to say why I thought it was great, and also describe what happened to get to the point where we are today. So I used to have a level 100 swordsman and level 130 berserker called Dangerfart, who I really liked. Unfortunately the game has gone through 2 account migrations and I missed out on one, so I don't have these characters. RIP Dangerfart, you tooted all the way to the digital grave. I want to talk about this game, so I have started a game with a new character. You are a Spoon. Spoonton 68. Check duplicates. I better bloody hope that it's available. Yeah, Spoon. Hello. That's my greeting. I designed it. So I'll say right now that the best part of Atlantica is the combat. Most MMOs, combat devolves into clicking the enemy to attack and waiting for skills to cool down. I don't mean to disrespect this type of combat. I enjoyed it for a while too in other MMOs, but for me this combat became tedious once the grind kicked in. And I think the reason why is that combat is relatively simple. There are only a few things to consider in each battle, namely pressing the mouse for the next attack when the animation finishes, using skills when they're available, and possibly moving. So combat in Atlantica involves these general things, but on super steroids. For you see in Atlantica, your team, which consists of your main hero as well as up to 8 mercenaries, are in a 3x3 grid. Your enemy too has up to 9 characters in an opposing 3x3 grid, and you take turns bashing each other. This was hugely novel for MMOs, and playing Atlantica today, this combat still feels great. Now let me gush about the combat and how it kept me hooked for 130 levels. Specifically, I break it into 3 aspects that you have to be mindful of in every battle that keeps me engaged. And in my opinion, it elevated it far beyond the skill countdown combat. So when the character select, one unique thing is that the main character is defined by their weapon type. This defines what kind of weapon the character uses, which is odd compared to most MMOs, except everyone in Atlantica is defined by their weapon. The different weapons differ, would you believe it? This is because each weapon has different attacking areas. So the sword characters hit 1 square, spears attack 2, 1 square and the one behind, axes attack a row, guns attack a column, bows attack 1 square anywhere in the formation, whereas swords are limited to the front. Cannons do a cross, staff do 1, guitar do a spear attack area, but again anywhere in the formation. So your main hero can have any one of these weapons, but additionally each mercenary you recruit uses one of these weapon classes. So you can hire swordsmen, spearmen, gunners, bowmen, Vikings who wield an axe, shamans who wield a staff, and you can hire whichever mercs you want, so you have a variety in your team as to what weapons are at your disposal. For instance, you could have a team full of swordsmen, but you'll want some ranged mercs to do some extra damage, and probably some magic mercs to do some damaging magic skills in case the enemy has a high physical defense. So variety is the spice of life, and the best teams mix up melee, range and magic to be flexible in a range of different conditions. Is it Alt F? There we go. So let's change our formation. So we talked about different weapons. So I don't want a mage in my front row. The swordsman's fine, swordsman's fine. Mage, again, shouldn't be in the front row. Archer, archer, mage. So let's put the mage there. I'm going to put myself there. Front center, because even though I'm a spearman, I'm pretty melee enough to be able to take hits. So I've got a back row full of mages. That should be sufficient. Enemies too vary in what weapon type they have. Running into bow enemies will mean any member of your party may be getting hit, not necessarily the front row. Furthermore, the enemy formation is not fixed, so even in a grid where there are 2 to 3 fixed enemy types, the formation that they may appear in the 3x3 grid varies, which presents an interesting choice of which mercs to attack with. Each turn you can only move 5 of your 9 mercs, and you have the ability to optimize who should attack to most effectively win the battle. Are all the enemies in a row? Then attack them with the axe merc. In a column, the gunner will do the job. But it's not often that simple. Enemy formations are usually more complex, and the mixture of ground and aerial units changes the calculation. This is because melee units cannot hit aerial units with their basic attack, necessitating range or magic mercs to attack instead. Except for the cannon class, which despite being ranged cannot hit aerial enemies. Not to mention the character you want to move may not be able to move this turn based on previous actions or their inherent speed stat. So if your desired merc is not one of those 5 mercs able to move this turn, you may have to guard some mercenaries, which allows the next fastest character to have their turn. So you may also want to move an injured merc out of the front row to avoid them being killed, which would require a life potion. However, this counts as an action for both moving mercs, and generally means someone with lesser defense heads to the front of the formation. And this strategy depends on the type of enemy. So some have melee weapons and are limited to hitting the front row, while others use ranged or magic and can attack any merc in the formation. And then there are specific enemies that, if you have them on low health at the start of their turn, they will self-destruct, dealing a lot of damage and giving you no experience or items. And this is another aspect of battles to manage, as each enemy drops an item when they die, and picking up that item takes one mercenary 1 turn. So the player must make a decision to attack existing enemies and risk losing an item which disappears after a few turns, or getting the item but having fewer mercs to attack and clear out the enemy formation. All this gets even harder to manage later game when other enemies can join the battle, leading to up to 27 enemies. I had difficulty naming this one category of combat strategy, mainly because I've grouped a lot of things together and lied to you and saying it's one category. But these things are connected and are collectively the essence of combat. Choosing your team, your formation, choosing who to attack which enemy, managing enemy attack patterns, moving mercs, and managing picking up items. So you see, there's lots of things to think about and strategize in each battle. Remember how I said melee enemies can't attack aerial enemies with their standard attack? This is true, but they can attack with their magic. So each mercenary has about 2 to 3 magic skills, each of which is different. These skills can do extra damage, like the gunner's charge shot or the swordsman's flame sword, or a debuff which can be even more powerful, like the archer who can silence a row, which is helpful early game against pesky magical enemies. Another great debuff is the Viking's freeze a row, I forget what it's called, which is possibly the best early game move as it essentially stuns all enemies in a row, making them unable to attack. This is particularly good for crowd management. But there are also magic attacks that buff the hero's team. For instance, getting a shaman in the early game is pivotal as her magic can heal a row of your team, which is necessary to stay alive. She's a female shaman. Did you know she's a female shaman? This is incredible. Magic can't be used willy-nilly, however. It takes a lot of AP to use, meaning that the character will probably not be able to move next turn, but their strategic use can tip the tides of battle, so it's always something to consider. And consider that different enemies have similar magic to your mercs, so don't be surprised that you'll come across enemies who silence you, or freeze a row of your formation, or even heal and resurrect themselves. So it's important to silence or deal with these enemies first, even though they tend to be in the back of the formation, protected by the melee front rows. There is a final mechanic that is layered on top of these 2 classes that I've made, and that is the stun system. Simply, the stun mechanic means that any character, either on the hero or enemy teams, that is hit with basic attacks for 3 consecutive turns are then stunned for the next 2 turns. These characters do not attack, they do not get AP or action points, and they take some additional damage when they're hit. So to say that this is a hugely important mechanic is an understatement. In fact, the best way to fight is to put a lot of stun pressure on the enemy. You can do this with weapons with a large AoE with a basic attack like a gun, an axe, or a cannon. In this way, a good offense is the best defense as it leaves the enemy effectively helpless. However, as I said, this mechanic also applies to your own team, and in a team where everyone plays an important role, a stunned merc is a big disadvantage. This is why I held off talking about the monk, this beautiful old man with a fabulous hat, because he has a magic skill that reduces the combo counter of some of your units. Because of the importance of this mechanic, even though the monk is one of the lowest grade units in the game, it is not uncommon to see him in the endgame teams. Okay, so combat involves a lot of things. Your weapons, formations, actions, use of mercs and magic, and applying that stun. The combat is so good that this is the only game that I enjoy watching high-level PvP matches of. Seeing the high-level mercs and the crazy magic is really cool. Okay, I'll stop talking too much about the combat. So outside of combat, the thing that I like about the merc system was that you're responsible for upgrading each merc. So in most MMOs, you have one character with a complex upgrade path. In this game, even though you're in charge of upgrading many mercs, the trade-off is that the upgrade path is relatively simple. But this simplicity didn't mean that it wasn't rewarding. Each merc could be trained in one or two skills using a skill book, and it was your choice which of the skills and how many they learnt. Main characters could learn a range of skills from different mercs in their weapon category, making them a step more complicated. Stat points is more tricky as they are randomly allocated on the use of a growth file, but using growth files in your mercs overall made them stronger. Furthermore, all mercs could be upgraded at levels 20, 50, 80, 100, and I think 120 or 130 for a stat boost. Of course, there were higher grade mercs. These ones typically required more expensive crystals to upgrade compared to your simpler mercs. And finally, each merc had their own equipment to maintain or upgrade. Now, managing up to 9 sets of gear, including helmets, boots, the whole shebang, may seem like too much. But when you give your archer a +7 death bow of dying, I made that name up, but you get what I mean, they could kick ass in combat. Dude, I got a +7 mother flippin' spear. Let's get a gun for my gun mercenary. And let's get a sword for my sword mercenary. May as well. So managing the different sets of gear always felt fun and important, and useful in combat. There are other cool things that I could mention, like for instance, the world of Atlantica is in fact Earth. Maybe in the future, I don't actually remember. So the game world consists of the continents of the world that we know. So for some reason, to my mind, this is cool enough. I enjoyed running around China on a horse. But what is really cool about the world is the aesthetic. The worlds look beautiful, although functionally they are just long branching corridors. There was an attempt to extract features from the real-world geography and culture, but then crank the fantasy element to 11. See, look, this is, I don't remember this zone, but I remember just the beauty of the world. It's just like, it's very mystical. Wow. Yeah, you really need those portals to be running around, don't you? Perth isn't... Oh, that's cool. I'm from Perth, that's why I care about Perth. I also like the music, which is an odd thing to say about an MMO. The music in the towns varied by the region of the world, but they're all pretty great. I like China and Southern Europe. The battle themes are good. Yggdrasil theme was memorable. Wait, why am I talking about them? I'll just let you listen to them for yourself. also liked the crafting system, which was extremely open. If you wanted to, with enough time and money, you could craft every item in the game, barring special items and most quest items. But if you wanted to, say, just craft spears, you can focus on that. It's entirely up to you. And the final system I enjoyed was the house mechanic. Once you purchased a house, you can warp to it at any time outside of battle. I thought the appearance of all houses were pretty rad. I went with the Mediterranean, but the Japanese garden and the Greek island house were visually stunning. So you could get furniture for the house, which I didn't bother as it was too expensive. But houses do offer you a place to store your mounts, and as well as any extra mercenaries. And you can also buy facilities like mines or herb gardens, so you can farm resources daily. So it was a nice little oasis with some benefits for the player gameplay-wise. But Endors was integrated into Korean developers Nexon in 2011, the guys who made MapleStory. At this point, Nexon was the leading publisher of online microtransaction-based games. Oh, great. I was cautiously optimistic, however. Nexon were a larger company, and there was the potential for the larger publisher to provide more resources to the Endors devs and to improve server efficiency. Unfortunately, it was from this partnership that Atlantica started going downhill. I was actively playing Atlantica over this time and migrated my account, and I saw firsthand what happened to the game. To players, it felt like Endors devs cared about game balance. However, Nexon only seemed to care about profit margin. They started adding things like crazy, new mercs, which was nice as basic mercs were boring, new costumes, new mounts, now all available in the item mall. Anything they could sell for monies. Which is good in a way, getting more content is nothing to sniff at, but there were two sinister things about this rapid release of content. One was that the purchased items were a lottery. There is no certainty you will get what you want and paid for, which is shit, right? Which is obviously just stupid. So the frequency of content was basically a way of getting players back into the item mall, betting their money for the latest gear, and the quicker the content, the quicker the waves of spending to get the latest stuff. The second issue was that they added stuff so frequently, they introduced power creep like crazy. Anything but the latest mount and costumes were mostly useless. And the other thing that resulted from this was inflation. It was just humongous inflation. These things were added without balance in mind, and so combat became restricted to having the best mercs, which unlike most mercs which you can get in quests, these mercs were item mall only, the best mount and the best wings. The worst example of power creep, I feel, is the Atlantean main classes. New classes for the players, main mercenary, who were by far overpowered, essentially overrunning the game's interesting PvP. For instance, the Blade Master, who was like the Swordsman but with better stats and dual-wielding swords, and for some reason can attack enemies in a cross instead of the one unit a regular sword hero can attack. I mean, the swords attack a cross like a bloody cannon merc. How does that make sense? Compared to the original heroes, they just didn't feel right. There was not enough care or thought put into their visual design or their gameplay balance. In fact, here's me complaining about their ridiculous appearance. First of all, this is not protecting your body. What is she? That's nothing. There's nothing there. I'm sorry. I don't know why this pisses me off so much. It's just so dumb. It's just like appealing to the lowest common denominator. See, look. She looks rad. She looks rad as hell. I mean, what is this? What is this? So what about those extra resources Nexon put into the game? Well, despite the extra resources, for some reason the game got buggier. It became clear as a player that Nexon were applying a lot of pressure on the devs to make money with the frequency of item mall content being released. Some added content was nice, some of the new mercs were freely available if you do their high level quest, and some of the best mercs were IM only. You needed to buy them and their skills with real money. Another addition was the Final Fantasy tactic style TBS battles, which felt half-brained and nowhere near as fun as standard combat. It wasn't bad, but the animations were wonky, the pacing of the battle seemed off, and the battlefields were empty and boring. And it was around then I stopped playing. I would only come back to the world of AO to do this video. So what happened to Atlantica Online? Well, like most MMOs that popped up in this time, as the MMORPG wave passed, many of these games became obscure and got shut down. These online games suffer a fate worse than most, as it requires an online server, so when they close down they are gone for good. And it seems like Atlantica Online, unique as it was, didn't make Nexon enough moolah, and so they dropped it. It was going to be shut down, however got picked up by a different publisher called Velof? Has anyone heard of them? Velof, for those few of you who don't know, like you Jerry, come on, step it up Jerry, is a small Filipino publisher who aimed to revive Atlantica Online to its former glory. While I don't have much experience with Velof, having only played to get the footage for this video, their reaction online is mixed. Some are positive, saying that they are doing a better job than Nexon did, others lambasting the company for little added content, rehashed events, and being seemingly incapable of running the game. Indeed, what I noticed during my time was some bugginess.
Oh, it runs so bad.
Let me back out of this situation.
Yeah, it just runs so bad. It's such a shame.
Particularly the amount of time it took to enter the first battle of a play session, and some buggy running animation, although this just could be my internet.
What a gate. What an animation.
But to be fair to Veloth, overall game bugginess increased under Nexon, and they had far more resources than Veloth. The mood is a bit sour, and in my web searches I found a number of people asking how the game is now, and how busy the servers are. Atlantica Online is still up and running, but it is on a downward trajectory, and I feel it is only a matter of time that it ceases to exist. Which is a shame because, in my opinion, it was one of the few MMOs that wasn't just a WoW clone. I feel mixed feelings playing this game. I kinda want to jump back into it. The world, combat and character progression got its hooks into me again. However, it has been a long time away from the game for me. I feel a bit like an old man as there are all these new mercs and weapon categories that I'm not familiar with. And all the issues that came up during Nexon are still present in the game, bugginess included, which made it difficult to get into. Nevertheless, it is sad to see it fall from grace, both in popularity and in gameplay. However, hopefully, with this video, I've been able to show you why, despite its troubled existence, Atlantica Online is an awesome game.